In every school, there's always someone who thinks they can bring others down. They think their words can break you, that they can control the situation, that you'll just walk away defeated. But every once in a while, you meet someone who doesn't fit that mold. Someone who, no matter how hard you push, stands tall. Someone who won't let the world bend them, no matter how many times they get shoved. That someone is Jasmine. And today? Well, today Jasmine was about to face her bully. But little did Samantha know, Jasmine wasn't just some quiet girl trying to get through the day. No, she was a champion. A national karate champion. And today, Jasmine was about to show Samantha exactly what that meant. Samantha thought she had the power to make others feel small. She'd done it 1,000 times before, walking around, sneering at anyone who didn't fit her image of what mattered. But she didn't know Jasmine. She didn't know the kind of strength that comes from years of training, discipline, and knowing who you are. Jasmine wasn't interested in the fight. She never was. She'd been taught that real strength wasn't about proving something to others. It was about knowing when to walk away. But sometimes the world forces you to stand your ground. And when that happens, you better be ready. Today, Samantha was about to learn that Jasmine wasn't someone you could push around. Not today. Today she was going to prove that no one, no matter how big they think they are, can break her. Not without a fight. Jasmine had always been different, but not in the way most people would expect. She wasn't loud, she wasn't brash, and she wasn't the one always trying to get attention. In fact, she spent most of her time flying under the radar, blending into the background. But if you paid close attention, you'd notice something in the way she carried herself, something deeper. It wasn't just a quiet confidence. It was a stillness that made her seem unshakable. She walked with purpose, but without the need to announce herself. She didn't crave validation or the limelight. And yet, wherever she went, people couldn't help but notice the energy she gave off. A certain calm strength that no one could ignore. That's how Jasmine was, unassuming, but undeniably powerful. At only 16, Jasmine had already made a name for herself in the world of karate, a national champion, a title most kids her age could only dream of. But Jasmine didn't live for the titles or the accolades. She lived for the discipline, the focus, the constant drive to push herself, not because anyone was watching, but because she knew that true strength came from within. It was something her parents had taught her early on. Real strength wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about being the loudest or the most popular. Real strength was about knowing when to act and when to stay calm. Knowing when to walk away and knowing when to stand your ground. Her parents taught her that strength wasn't measured by how hard you could hit or how many people you could defeat. Strength was in the small moments, the times when you pushed through your own self-doubt, when you got back up after falling, when you fought not just to win, but to become the best version of yourself. Jasmine learned early on that real power came from control, from balance not just in your body, but in your mind, your heart, your soul. She wasn't like the others fighting for attention, fighting to prove themselves. Jasmine wasn't interested in proving anything to anyone. When Jasmine entered a room, she didn't need to say a word to get respect. It was in the way she moved, the way she carried herself. She didn't try to stand out. She didn't need to. She simply did. And while others scrambled to figure out how to make themselves noticed, Jasmine had already figured it out. She knew exactly who she was, and she was at peace with it. That was her strength. A quiet, powerful force that could not be broken. But then there was Samantha. Samantha wasn't like Jasmine. She didn't thrive in quiet strength. No, Samantha thrived on attention. She needed to be seen. She needed to be at the center of every conversation, every situation. If people weren't looking at her, she found a way to make them. And it wasn't just about being noticed, it was about being the best. But not the best in any real sense. No, Samantha wanted to be the one everyone admired, the one everyone feared. She needed to be at the top of the social ladder, and if that meant knocking others down to get there, so be it. Samantha was the kind of girl who tore others down to make herself feel powerful. If someone wasn't like her, if they didn't fit into her narrow view of what was cool or acceptable, she found a way to make them feel small. She knew how to use her words, her actions, to manipulate people into thinking they were lesser, to make them feel like they didn't matter. She had a way of finding weaknesses, whether it was someone's appearance, their social status, or their insecurities, and picking at them over and over until it hurt. But what Samantha didn't understand, what she couldn't possibly know, was that she was playing a dangerous game, because she was about to meet someone who didn't play by her rules, someone who wasn't going to crumble under the weight of her cruelty, someone who was so much more than she realized. And that someone, that was Jasmine. Jasmine wasn't the type to get caught up in drama. She wasn't the type to retaliate or strike back. But she wasn't afraid to defend herself either. Samantha's sneers, her taunts, they didn't reach Jasmine the way they did to others. Jasmine had something Samantha didn't understand. Strength. Quiet, unshakable strength. And soon Samantha would find out just how much power there was in a quiet girl who knew exactly who she was. And she would learn the hard way that some people just can't be broken. Look at Ms. Perfect, walking around like she owns the place. What are you, some kind of ninja? You think you're too good to talk to us? The words cut through the noise of the cafeteria like a sharp blade. A few students nearby glance over and giggle, egging Samantha on. She stops just in front of Jasmine's table, crossing her arms and standing with exaggerated arrogance. Samantha's friends gather around, forming a small circle, clearly entertained by the scene that's unfolding. Jasmine, who had been calmly eating, doesn't react right away. She continues to pick at her food, her eyes not leaving the plate in front of her. She's heard these kinds of things before during her time in the dojo, her coaches pushing her with harsh words, telling her to do better, to be stronger. She's learned to shut it all out. She knows that the louder the words, the less they matter. So she stays focused, letting the comments slide off her like water off a duck's back. Samantha's words didn't bother Jasmine. Not really. She had heard worse in the dojo, her coaches pushing her to her limits, telling her to be stronger, faster, better. They weren't kind, but they were honest. And Jasmine had learned to block it out, to focus on the task at hand. No, it wasn't the words that made Jasmine tense. It was the way Samantha kept pushing. The way she seemed to think that words alone could break her down, that if she just kept poking, kept prodding, she could get a rise out of her. But Jasmine wasn't the kind of person you could break with words, and Samantha wasn't ready to accept that. Miss Karate Kid doesn't even have the guts to say anything back. You think you're too good for us, too good for this school, or maybe you just don't want to get your hands dirty. Her friends laugh louder, egging her on as they watch Jasmine, waiting for a reaction. But Jasmine stays still, her face unreadable, the tension in her body barely noticeable to anyone who isn't paying close attention. She takes a deep breath and slowly stands up, her movements calm and measured. She's not afraid of confrontation. She just doesn't want to be part of this circus. She grabs her books and starts to walk away, but Samantha steps into her path, blocking her way. Where do you think you're going? Not going to say anything? You're all talk in class, but out here, you don't even have the guts to stand up for yourself. What's the matter? Too scared to say anything back? Come on, don't be shy. This time, it wasn't just words. This time, Samantha crossed a line. Jasmine stumbled, her books falling to the ground, the laughter of her peers echoing in her ears. It was a moment of humiliation, one she hadn't expected. Samantha didn't just push her with words, she physically shoved her, challenging her to fight back, to give in to the anger she knew was building inside. But Jasmine didn't react. She didn't give Samantha the satisfaction of a rise, didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart. She stayed calm still. But deep down, something had shifted. For a moment, Jasmine considered just walking away. She could have turned around, gathered her books, and left the cafeteria. But something in her snapped. Samantha had pushed too far. The line between standing up for herself and walking away had blurred. Jasmine had always prided herself on keeping calm, keeping control. But there was a limit. And Samantha had just crossed it. Jasmine could have walked away. She could have kept her head down, gathered her books, and just walked out of the cafeteria. That's what she had always done before, ignored the taunts, taken the high road. She could have let it all slide off her, kept her cool, and pretended like nothing happened. But something inside her shifted. It wasn't about defending herself anymore. It wasn't about making a statement or showing Samantha that she was wrong. No, today it was different. Today, Jasmine wasn't just going to walk away. Today, she was going to show Samantha that she couldn't keep pushing her around. She wasn't just some quiet, defenseless girl who'd back down at the first sign of confrontation. Jasmine was a champion. And champions don't just get pushed, they stand their ground. Samantha thought she had control. She thought she could push and prod until Jasmine finally cracked. She didn't realize that Jasmine's silence wasn't weakness, it was strength. And it wasn't until she shoved Jasmine again, harder this time, that she began to understand just how wrong she was. This time, Jasmine didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She didn't give Samantha the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. Jasmine's voice, when it came, was calm, too calm for someone who had just been shoved in front of everyone. But that calm carried something more, the weight of someone who had nothing left to prove. A quiet strength that said, "You can't push me anymore." Jasmine's words were simple, but they carried everything she'd been holding back. "Don't touch me again." Just a few words, yet they rang louder than any shout or insult could ever hope to. The room went still. The whispers, the laughter, the mocking voices, they all died down. Jasmine wasn't playing by the same rules. She wasn't going to give Samantha what she wanted. And in that moment, Jasmine showed everyone in that room, including Samantha, what true strength looked like. Samantha, of course, wasn't finished. She stepped closer, too angry now to stop herself. She didn't believe that Jasmine would just stand there, unafraid, unshaken. She thought she could push Jasmine again, as if testing her, seeing if she could make Jasmine break. But Jasmine's calm gaze never wavered. It was like watching a storm building beneath a peaceful surface, waiting for the right moment to unleash. Samantha thought she could win this battle by force. What she didn't realize was that Jasmine was never going to fight her on her terms. Jasmine wasn't interested in playing her game. She wasn't going to let Samantha control her with shoves or taunts. And when Jasmine stepped back, standing her ground with nothing more than a look in her eyes, Samantha finally realized that she wasn't the one in control anymore. For the first time in a long time, Jasmine wasn't just walking away from the chaos. She was standing tall in the middle of it. And Samantha, well, she was starting to understand the difference between trying to break someone and meeting someone who couldn't be broken. Jasmine didn't need to say a word. She could have turned away, ignored the taunts, and walked out of that cafeteria. She could have chosen the path of least resistance, the one where she kept her head down and kept moving forward. But something inside her shifted. Samantha had crossed a line, and Jasmine wasn't just going to walk away this time. She was done being pushed. It wasn't about defending herself anymore. It wasn't about trying to prove a point. It was about standing her ground. Jasmine wasn't some quiet, defenseless girl who would crumble under the pressure. She wasn't someone you could poke at and expect to back down. She was a champion, and champions don't just walk away when they're challenged. Samantha charged at her, all rage and no precision, but Jasmine was different. She moved with the kind of precision that only years of training could perfect. One quick step to the side, one swift leg sweep, and Samantha was on the floor, stunned, humiliated, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Jasmine didn't rush. She didn't react impulsively. She simply waited. Every movement Jasmine made was a statement in itself. She didn't need to yell, didn't need to show off. Every breath she took, every calm step, was proof that her strength wasn't something to flaunt, it was something to control. Samantha thought she could get under Jasmine's skin. She thought that her words, her pushes would break her. But Jasmine wasn't like the others. She didn't need to defend her pride. She didn't need to meet Samantha's anger with her own. Her silence, her calm was her response. This time, Samantha was no match for Jasmine's control. One simple move, no force, no rage, just perfect control over her opponent. Samantha collapsed to the floor, struggling to breathe, her body now at the mercy of Jasmine's strength. And yet Jasmine stood tall, unwavering, unflinching. Samantha's anger was no match for Jasmine's composure. Jasmine had nothing to prove. The victory wasn't in the fight, it was in the control. Jasmine had let Samantha push, had let her think she could break her. And now, Jasmine had taken back control. No words, no bravado, just quiet strength. Jasmine didn't need to rub it in. She didn't need to show off. She'd already won. The cafeteria was completely silent now. The laughter, the jeers, they all vanished in an instant. All eyes were on Jasmine and on Samantha, who was still lying on the floor, struggling to catch her breath. Her bravado, her false sense of superiority was gone. In its place, there was disbelief. She couldn't understand what had just happened. She had pushed and prodded, thinking Jasmine was just another target. But Jasmine wasn't the person Samantha had imagined her to be. Jasmine had stood tall, and now Samantha had to face the reality that she had underestimated her in the worst way. Jasmine had done what most people wouldn't. She had shown restraint, had shown that strength didn't mean throwing a punch or shouting the loudest. Strength was in the stillness, in the control, in knowing when to act and when to let the moment speak for itself. The teacher intervened, trying to separate them, but it didn't matter anymore. The entire school had witnessed what happened. The rumors started to spread before the lunch bell had even rung. By the time the final period was over, everyone knew what had gone down. Jasmine, the quiet girl who never stood out, had shown the entire school that she wasn't someone to mess with. Jasmine's walk through the hallway was different now. Where there had been whispers of mockery, there were now nods of respect. She hadn't changed who she was, still calm, still quiet, but the perception had shifted. No one would underestimate her again. Jasmine, that was amazing. I didn't know you were like that. I didn't want to fight. But sometimes you have to stand up for yourself. Jasmine didn't need the praise. She didn't need people to recognize her strength. She had already proven it to herself. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Jasmine had shown that true power wasn't about being the loudest. It wasn't about winning the fight, it was about knowing when to stand your ground, when to hold your head high, and when to walk away with quiet confidence, knowing you've already won. Later that night, Jasmine sat in front of her mirror, her reflection staring back at her with calm intensity. The events of the day replayed in her mind, but there was no anger, no regret. She wasn't a fighter by choice. She never had been. She was someone who believed in peace, in avoiding conflict when possible. But today something had changed. Something inside her had snapped, something that said enough was enough. Jasmine touched her karate medals gently, her fingers brushing the cool metal, each one a reminder of the years of discipline, of the hard work, and the strength she had built not just in her body, but in her spirit. Jasmine knew she wasn't just a fighter. She wasn't someone who thrived on the idea of combat, of winning or losing. She wasn't defined by the trophies she collected or the accolades she'd received. No, Jasmine was a person of strength, a person of self-respect. She had stood up for herself, yes, but more importantly, she had stood up for everyone who had ever been pushed around, overlooked, or made to feel less than. That's what today had been about, not violence, not revenge, but about knowing when to say enough is enough, about drawing a line and saying, I won't let you cross this. It wasn't about beating someone down. It wasn't about humiliating Samantha or proving a point. It was about standing firm in who she was, in what she believed in. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to fight dirty. Jasmine's strength came from within, from knowing who she was, from trusting that her quiet confidence could do more than any loud boast or flashy display ever could. The next day, Jasmine walked the halls with the same calm, steady pace. But this time something was different. The whispers that once followed her, the looks of dismissal or mockery, had faded. Now there was respect in their eyes. There was recognition. No longer did they see her as a target. No longer did they see her as the quiet girl who would just fade into the background. Today they saw her for who she truly was. Today they saw Jasmine for the champion she was, not because of the title she'd earned, but because of the strength she carried in her heart. Jasmine didn't need their validation. She never had. But in that moment, she understood something powerful. When you stand up for yourself, when you hold your ground and refuse to let anyone push you down, you become a force that can't be ignored. Jasmine wasn't just a champion because of her medals. She was a champion because she knew what it meant to rise, to stand tall, and to walk through life with a quiet strength that no one could ever take away. So Jasmine didn't just win the fight. She won something far greater: the respect of her peers, the knowledge of her own strength, and the understanding that true power doesn't come from how loud you can shout or how many people you can knock down. True strength, Jasmine showed us, isn't about being the toughest person in the room. It's about knowing when to stand your ground, when to remain calm in the face of adversity, and when to walk away, knowing that you've already won. Jasmine's victory wasn't just over Samantha, it was over the idea that silence equates to weakness. Her silence was strength, her calm was power, and her courage spoke volumes. What about you? Have you ever faced a bully? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for yourself, even when it felt like the odds were against you? How did you handle it? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. And if you believe in the power of quiet strength, in the kind of courage it takes to stand tall without saying a word, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and strength. Remember, strength isn't measured by the fights you win, but by the grace with which you face them.